Listeners everywhere, welcome to the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan, the weekly fix for your screen addiction and a trusted source for discussion of all things film and television. Please keep in mind that for the purposes of this podcast, Joel and Ryan are not acting as journalists, but rather fellow moving picture enthusiasts. All of their opinions should be taken as such. Also, please be warned that while Joel and Ryan may seem like petulant children, they are, in fact, adults who may occasionally use adult language. While they promise to bleep out all the worst words, it's a good bet you will still understand what they were saying. And now, with no further ado, here's Joel and Ryan.
All right, everybody, grab hold of some hanging chads and hold on for dear life. It is the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. I am Joel.
And I'm Ryan.
And we're so happy to have you back with us for another week. Today we have a brand new special guest. Never been with us before, and frankly, she's new to me too. This is a Ryan exclusive guest.
She's never listened to a podcast before I told her she was going on this thing. So it's all new for everybody.
It's all new for everybody. So, but we're gonna have her on, and I from the 30 seconds that I've chatted with her before we hit start on this show, she seems a delight, and so we are going to welcome Miss Shauna. Hey, Jack, and I'll keep talking. There she is. Woohoo!
Hey,
Hi,
Shauna.
Shauna.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, it's super fun. So how do you two know each other, and why don't I know you?
We just went to high school together.
Oh, well, there you go.
We've been connected, through social media sort of as long as it's been a thing, but I haven't, until just a few moments ago, I haven't talked to Shauna face to face since 1991. So
Wow.
She made a comment on something. Salem's Lot scared you or something as a kid?
Yeah. After watching that, I still have to sleep with the covers pulled up to my neck. It's something I could never get over. Like, even though I know that a vampire's not going to come get me now, if I wake up and the covers aren't up to my neck, I pull them back up.
It made me laugh when I was a kid. When Jaws was on, I wouldn't let my feet dangle over the couch. I had to sit with them up underneath my body so that nothing could sneak by and grab me during the movie. So you made a joke. Well, this probably isn't podcast related, but I just had to correct her and say that's exactly podcast related. That's what the whole thing is all about.
And you should come on the show.
Yeah,
and you should come on the show, and then we tried to figure out a way why, and we think we'll see. Jury's out, but we'll see if we came up with a good idea. I think it's pretty cool.
So first of all, before we get into our topic, we did want to make sure that we acknowledge and say a brief few words. We lost four technically. One, not really a movie person, but in this past week we just lost four pretty huge people in the movie and entertainment business. We'll first start out with Sean Connery. Of course, I mean, what is there to say about Sean Connery?
He's an icon. He doesn't really need us to prop him up at all. You can go back and listen to the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan's James Bond shows. That first show is, talks about Sean a lot, and I said when we sort of memorialized him on the Facebook page, that even growing up, even when he was out of fashion in the late 70s and early 80s before he won his Oscar, and then the career took off again, like he just always did good work, and it was amazing. And he was, I think, and this will probably stick, I don't remember anyone remaining a romantic lead like into their 70s like he did. That could be a joke, a little bit like an Entrapment or Russia House, but when you watch the movies, it didn't feel like a joke. You know, they sort of made that sort of thing work. The
Yep.
old guy with the super young, hot, up and coming female star. We talk about that all the time about what a sort of ridiculous thing that is. But Sean somehow made it work. He had a lot.
Yeah, I mean,
going
it's like
for him, and
he had that he had that shorthand with the audience because of his appeal as James Bond. It gave him a certain amount of cachet that we
But I don't know. Yeah, but I don't think of him much as Bond. You know, I feel like he quit that at the right time. He could have kept doing it for decades. He and Roger Moore are the same age, so I mean, he could have kept playing Bond into the 80s if he wanted to.
Right.
You know, he outgrew that, or his take on that character, and his performances and the parts he got. It took a while, but there's so much more interesting than that guy. You know, we love James Bond here on the show, but that's not you're not exploring humanity through that character. You know, the classic action hero. So
favorite non-James Bond Sean Connery role, go.
It's Malone in the Untouchables for me, without question. That's just, I love that performance.
Shauna, do you have a
that one? I agree, and I liked him. What was the one where he was the Russian
sub commander?
What's that?
The sub commander.
Yeah, it was October.
Hunt for Red October.
That's what I was gonna say too.
I really liked his Russian accent in that one.
His Russian accent that sounded really pretty Scottish.
Yeah, Moscow by way of Glasgow.
Sam Neill and all those British guys that were playing Russians are all doing their best accent, and Connery's just showing up like,
"Yep,
this is how I talk.
This is how I talk." Yeah.
And he still looks great.
Money.
I'll wear the wig, but I'm not changing my voice for this thing. I think that's awesome. It's good. He's probably better in it because he didn't, honestly.
Right. And we another guy that we lost this week, John Sessions, tremendous British actor.
Not a lot of people are going to know John Sessions by name, you know, but he's just one of those guys, like 130 credits. He just showing up in not so much like the next guy we talk about, but in kind of every sort of British institution along the way. He is fantastic in 2 Kenneth Branagh Shakespeare films. He's probably better in the less cool film, whose name I'm not remembering right now. What's the comedy musical that they did? Remember that?
Comedy musical?
Yeah. It was after Much Ado, kind of in the late 90s, I want to say. And then he's played McMorris in Henry V, which he's fantastic in that. Everybody's really good in Henry V. But he's just in all kinds of stuff and was really, really cool. And I love I love guys like that really disappear into the roles in movies. Like, you know, he's the reason you don't know who John is, and you might not even know him by looking at him, even though you've probably seen stuff with him, is he kind of just shows up, and he really sort of, I don't want to say knows his place, but he gets the storytelling to a degree that he helps bring home the reality, everything that he takes part in. And that's very, very cool to me. And then the third guy is Jeffrey Palmer. I just go ahead.
I was just gonna say on John Sessions, where actually I first saw John Sessions was on the original British version of Whose Line Is It Anyway? Yeah. And he was outstanding as an improv comic. It just so good. And then as you already mentioned, Jeffrey Palmer, another just a stalwart British actor.
Jeffrey Palmer, I think if you do sort of poke your head on the internet, and it's Jeffrey with a G, you know, British Jeffrey, I think you'll recognize him, because to me he's just so recognizable. He's the ultimate British bulldog I consider Jeffrey a sort of comic actor, even though unlike John, who could ham it up, he's always the stiff upper lip sort of British guy with the cheeks hanging down. And if you want a real laugh, his one guest spot on John Cleese's Faulty Towers is on YouTube. Look up Jeffrey Palmer, Faulty Towers, Faulty's FAWLTY, and or on Google, look up Jeffrey Palmer sausage breakfast. He was just delightful. I mean,
we'll see if we can find that scene and post it on our
we'll try and do that
on Facebook, or at least on our YouTube page.
Connery, obviously a big star. These other guys weren't big stars at all, but
they're pretty iconic in Britain. If you watched BBC television in Britain, there was plenty of John Sessions, plenty of Jeffrey Palmer.
And you don't have to be a big star to help the machine along either.
Yeah.
We'll talk about some non-big stars in the movies we're going to talk about.
Yeah, he starred for years opposite Judi Dench in a show on, why can I not remember the name of that show?
Oh yeah.
It was called As Time Goes By.
That was kind of his show. That's what I think in Britain, that's what he'll be most remembered for.
Yeah. And
but he was on literally every British comedy that was ever made. He made some sort of appearance on.
Right. And someone who American audiences saw pretty much every day if they wanted to. We lost Alex Trebek. Not really, not a movie guy, but obviously just kind of an iconic figure in American pop culture, and the quintessential game show host. So he was a good man and a good sport, because boy, he got made fun of a lot on some very very funny things. So so we unfortunately lost those four kind of entertainment biggies this week. So we tip our hat, we wish you adieu, and thank you for the wonderful work. All right, so today we are going to talk, and the reason why we have the conversations that especially Ryan had with Shauna led to a discussion about movies that sort of helped us as cisgendered white middle class, lower middle class Midwesterners. You
can go even further. We're all from the Northwest Minneapolis suburbs.
We're
all the same age,
Yeah, and it are the movie experiences that helped us understand, or at least opened our eyes a little bit. Not understand. We'll never understand, but
it inspired some sort of social awakening inside each of us, I think.
Correct, especially towards the Black American experience. And so we wanted to discuss and just honor those movies a little bit, and the role that they played, and how we see other films, and how we sort of the impact they had on us at the time that we saw them. We are going to go there. So we have three. So we have a movie apiece, and but we'll all obviously talk about it. I'm not just going to say, Shauna, go, and then we're going to leave. No, it's no. So, but we're gonna with the first movie, and I mention that because the first movie that we're going to talk about is the movie that Shauna brought to the table, and we're going to be talking about these in chronological order, the way they were released. And the first movie is Steven Spielberg's The Color Purple. So Shauna, like, what was your, like, what was your first
when did you
experience?
first see that? What's the story behind your first watching The Color Purple?
Okay, so The Color Purple was released in 1985, and the year that it was released, 1985, I happened to be 13 years old, and my mom took me to see this picture. It's based on a novel by Alice Walker.
Pulitzer Prize winning novel.
What's that?
It's a Pulitzer Prize winning novel.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And it was directed by Steven Spielberg, which that right there is remarkable. Just to start it off with, that a white director of that substance and that was that well known directed a movie about a Black woman, a young. Well, it was really an epic story. It branched 40 years, I believe, of this young woman's life. But it started when the young woman played by Whoopi Goldberg was 13 years old. And one of the first scenes was Celie, the girl, the 13-year-old girl, was being raped by who they thought was her father. So this was a really big film. It was very powerful. It was very powerful for women, really. And I think that's probably why my mom took me to go see it. And I talked to Joel and Ryan about how I was going to approach talking about this movie, and it's going to be authentically. And so at 13 years old, one of my younger memories from when I was 4 was being exposed by my uncle. My uncle exposed himself to me. And I never told anybody until, I mean, maybe 7 years ago. It was so deep inside of me. But going to see The Color Purple and seeing this happening to this 13-year-old girl, no, excuse me, she was 14, I was 13, that resonated right there. I mean, that drew me in. Of course, my experience wasn't nearly as bad as hers, but when you have two young girls having this type of exposure and what's happening to her, you identify with each other. And so going on to watch the movie and everything that happened in it, there was a lot of physical and sexual abuse against women. It was very much graphically shown. And so
pretty amazing for a PG-13 movie.
Yes.
At the time. And he, of course, Spielberg was, we'll talk about the ways he was a good and wasn't a good choice. But one of the ways he was a good choice, so like you said, he was on top of the world and could do any project he wanted, and he picked this because it spoke to him as well. And he was also kind of ideal for it in a way that he had this magic touch in filmmaking where he could make this story with so many harsh realities in it, palatable, and in a just from an entertainment standpoint, so that you could get from point A to B and go through this journey with this character. Because it's not, she escapes one thing and gets into one other horrible thing and is trapped there for all practical purposes. It turns out she grows into a place where she can kind of escape all of that, but it takes her whole life to do it. It's kind of amazing in that way, but it's it was a film that, like you said, doesn't shy away from the harsh realities of that, but at the same time delivers it in such a way that a mom could take her tween kid to see it, and that it was still okay to do that.
Right. Well,
so it's just to expound on what you're saying there from a filmmaking standpoint, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. And the thing is, for me, is that you could go to the movie and get into it, and you're watching it, and after a while you're so involved in it, or I was, and I have continued to be every time I've watched it, absolutely consumed by it. And for me, the color of her skin kind of drops away after a little while. I mean, it's more definitely about this young girl growing into a young woman and eventually on in age. And there are so many issues about women that are brought up and that you live with her through. and the storytelling is so engrossing that you just really, you're there with her. So that
Yeah,
for
it's not
me,
like you're not seeing color, but you're just connecting directly with another person.
right. And for me, it wasn't just watching a Black girl. It was this human that is living through this and had similar problems as like I had experienced. It very interestingly, so 13 was a very important age for me. My mom had divorced my father and we had moved to Minnesota from Colorado. And after this movie, she told me that my father had physically and sexually abused her as well. So everything that happened in that movie for me was kind of relatable. It was something that had affected my life. And so the really what I think Steven Spielberg did really well was he did all of that before he even introduced race. So you got to know Celie, you got to know her sister Nettie, you got to know, you know, Danny Glover, who became Whoopi Goldberg's husband, known as
Mr. They call
Right.
him.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Right. You got to know Oprah Winfrey's character, Sophia. You got to see how Sophia came in as a very strong woman and basically kind of told off her fiance, or she was pregnant with Mr. or the husband of Celie, his son. And she basically put Mr. in his place, which you'd never seen any woman do. And then that story goes on and you see the struggle between Sophia and Harpo. And he eventually becomes violent with her and she leaves him. And she has all these kids by him. You know, they say in the film, you know, Harpo would beat on Sophia, and then Sophia would beat on Harpo, and in between this, they kept having all these kids. And then she finally leaves him, and then they introduce the character of Suge Knight, and how does that influence the story? How Mr.'s mistress actually comes in and she's taken care of by Celie and ends up loving Celie and really helping Celie along. And then after all of this, after you've kind of really gotten to know these characters and care about them and understand what's going on, they introduce race. And what happens is Sophia, or Oprah Winfrey's character, is approached by a white woman, a rich white woman. And that white woman is looking at her kids and saying, they're so clean. Wouldn't you want to come be my maid? And Oprah Winfrey's character looks at her and she's like, hell no. And this woman gets, you know, she's just aghast. She can't believe that this Black woman is speaking back to her. And a white man comes over and slaps her, and Sophia decks him, punches him out. Next thing you know, Sophia is being released after many years of being in prison. Her eye is partially healed over from where she's been beaten while in the jail system, the prison system. And then she has to go and become the maid of this white woman. And basically her whole life is sold to this white woman in exchange for having insulted her. So this is the very first time that race is really introduced to this story. You're invested in it, you're invested in the people. And at that point, it's like, holy crap, I'm white and I'm watching this awful white woman doing this to this Black woman because this woman is Black. And that for me, I think, was really what made me look at race for the first time and try to imagine what that would be like. It was like it snuck up on me. And I know, I feel like that's kind of the way it at 13 years old, it opened my eyes to it. And I've always tried to learn and keep watching and keep hearing what Black people say happens to them, and what happens in our country. It's interesting because after that, you learn that Sophia has been working for this woman for, like, I think probably 8 years, and she hasn't seen her children in those 8 years. And this woman, the white woman, Ms. Millie, says, I will drive you to your children's house tomorrow. It's Christmas. I will drop
She's
you off.
learning how to drive and proud of herself, and is going to do this magnanimous thing for her servant.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, this is. There's so many powerful things in Color Purple, but I have to say this sequence is.
It gives me
it just guts you. I can't even tell you.
So there she drops off Sophia, and Sophia meets her youngest daughter for the first time since she was a baby, and her daughter doesn't even remember her. She says, it's nice to meet you. And eventually the whole family and all their friends and everybody, they come out, they go get Sophia, they bring her in the house, and Sophia is just trying to figure out what has happened. She doesn't even remember them, really. She doesn't know them anymore, is what she says. So as this scene is unfolding, outside you've got the white woman, Miss Millie, who's trying to get her car to move again. And she's moving it forward and she's moving it backwards. It looks like it's stuck. And then she gets stuck in reverse and she's starting to just freak out. So finally she puts it.
Some guys from the neighborhood, right, come along to try and help her.
Well, so hold on. Well, not even that. It's not guys from the neighborhood. They're all the men that were in the house come out, and she throws it into drive. She drives into a tractor. She throws it in reverse and drives into a tree and continues to do this back and forth, getting more and more flustered. And these Black men come out and they're trying to say, Miss Millie, let me help you. And that's making her even crazier.
Right. She feels completely threatened by the people trying to help her.
She's so scared by these Black men that she's just going faster and faster. And after a while, there are like 5 Black men on the car trying to get her to stop. There's other Black men standing around the car, and she gets out of the car. And at the end of it, she says, these men were trying to attack me.
Right.
Which was not even close. They were trying to keep her from destroying the piece of mechanical tractor that is their livelihood and slamming into the tree and possibly killing herself. And she says, they're trying to attack me. And Sophia has to take her home. After not even being in the house for 15 minutes with the kids she hasn't seen in 8 years. And this woman, this white woman, Miss Millie, just puts a white face on what racism is.
I can't remember who plays Miss Millie, but it's outstanding performance by her. But the moment that drives it all home is Oprah Winfrey was nominated for an Oscar for Color Purple. She realizes before anyone else what is happening here. She doesn't need to be told that she's taking her home. You could just see it on her face. Okay, this is over. You know, It's really, really powerful moment.
It's really powerful.
Yeah, it's this bit of wordless acting where she just resigns herself to, you know, the only thing she can do in this situation, which is obey, follow along. And the family, as much as they can, you know, roll the red carpet out for her. It is awkward and weird, but it's a family gathering where they're happy to see her, and they're you know, that's an incredible sequence in the movie. I remember, I guess not every detail of it, but I just remember it really, really, really well. Like you say,
it's a pivotal scene. Yeah. It's a scene that brings in race. And then after that,
As far as that goes, it's probably the most pivotal scene.
oh, absolutely. And I think that for me, I realized they're really in this position, you know, the hardship, the not having a lot of money, not, you know, being quite poor, and the juke joint where they're drinking a lot, and it really shows the position that they're in, which hadn't been shown the whole film to that point. I just think it's a remarkable way of making you think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it doesn't kind of, it follows through with that a little bit, but it doesn't really stay with that. It gets you back to these people, their relationships, their issues with each other, and their growth or lack thereof
Right.
from there, especially with the appearance of the mistress, like you said, the showgirl.
Yes. And
Yeah,
the interesting thing is, I hadn't watched it for a few years, and I just watched it again so that I'd be prepared for this.
Mhm.
And even now, like you said, they don't go much into race. There's one sentence after that scene, and it's when Shug shows up at Celie and Mister's house with her new husband. And Shug, or actually Celie and Mister, are both surprised and dismayed because they both equally probably love Shug. And she's here with this new guy. And Shug,
It is one of the weirder love triangles in movies, or the relationship between Celie and Shug in the novel is explicit relationship.
Yep.
That's the biggest change from the book to the screen. I think it's the second biggest, but I think from a plot standpoint, it's absolutely the biggest.
Yeah.
He pulls off a really sweet and nurturing relationship between them. The show has them kissing, which is a big step for a PG-13 movie in 1985. So it's not like he doesn't acknowledge it, but it's just not it's very implicit, loving relationship.
The only way that he could have acknowledged it, to get it out to the audience that he wanted.
Yeah,
right. He wanted it to be a movie for everybody, so that everybody could experience the story the way he did when he read the novel. And in that way, was really successful. The movie was successful. Right. It was a big hit in 1985. If you look at the other things that came out in 85, it's as far as the hits of 85, it's by far the most substantive film. That was a very superficial era in storytelling.
Right.
We look back on it fondly, you know, because we were all kids then. But when you look at the list, it's like that film and a couple others. But that film as a big hit movie for everyone, it definitely sticks out. And again, that's what Spielberg brought to the proceedings. He made it a mainstream thing and then the story of these people, of Celie in particular, could reach this wide audience. So in that way, it was a smashing success. I always, even he says, you know, if there was a black, you know, Quincy Jones helped produced it, did the music for it. If there was a black director at the time that had the clout to get that movie done, that's probably who should have done it. But the reality is,
there wasn't a black.
I don't think there was. I mean, there were certainly African-American directors, but to mount a period piece of that size with, you know, the sort of lavish budget that it had, Stephen makes it, you know, you read the book. I always say the best things about The Color Purple are right from the book. Like, the book gets most of the credit. He doesn't not get credit for it as a director. And the screenwriter, Menno Myers, really did a great adaptation of it. When you watch it, it's almost like I don't want to be too dismissive, but it's like this flowery, colorful Southern theme park of a place. And when you read it, what you get is this cold, gray Appalachian wasteland, essentially. And I feel like the one thing does sort of make its appearances in the film, but like he doesn't really capture the world of the story very well. But
Right.
the interpersonal relationships, which are his, and the big emotional moments, which are Spielberg's specialty.
Yeah. And I
They're
think
all there on the screen.
it almost needed that in order to get the audience back then.
I think all of us might have felt like we were being tortured otherwise.
Right. Oh yeah. And I don't think
Cinematically.
anybody would have wanted to watch it. Any white people, and that's who he wanted to watch it.
Right.
But
That's
going
who
to
needed to watch it, I think, more than anyone.
Right. Oh yeah. And the point I was going to make is that I just watched it again, and there's one more part, or where they do reflect on racism again, and that is when Shug and her new husband come, and she says to them, come on, you guys, I've been driving all night. There's nowhere for us to stay out here. And it's a reflection of it's the South during the early 1900s. There are no hotels for Black people. There's nowhere for them to stop. If they are traveling, they have to travel through the night. It's like you talk about the Green Book that they used to have for African Americans, for Black people in America, to let them know these are safe places for you to stop and stay. So it is a very brief moment, and I've never noticed it before, but it just goes to show you just have to keep watching and listening because it's still there. Mm-hmm. So yeah. that was how I got introduced to racism and trying to listen and understand. And
just that part of our shared history that our reality is built upon. It just, it's really amazing. The other thing I really love about Color Purple is and the book is this way too, which is great, but there isn't a the film has without spoiling the exact details, if any of you folks somehow haven't seen this, but it has a happy ending. It has an extremely hopeful ending. She in what's the stand up and cheer moment of the movie lays a curse on Mr. with an audience of basically the entire community of the film watching, and the curse becomes true, without getting into the specifics of it. And even him, and he's not a likable guy in the film at all by any stretch, but the film also goes out of its way to show you that he's a product of this cycle of violence.
Right. They show you throughout the whole thing. That was something I was going to bring up as well, as you see, when Celie first gets there, Harpo throws a rock at her and hits her in the head. And then some scenes later, Mr. is dragging Nettie, her sister, out of the house violently with Celie dragging on him. I mean, like she's not even on her feet. And the kids are all watching this as it happens. There's another scene where she's going to shave him with a close, or what kind of razor, the old-fashioned
yeah, the straight blade. Yeah
Thank you. And you can tell it's running through her mind to kill him. There's two scenes where this happens. The second one, Shug has to come up and stop her, and at the same time there's little girls in the yard playing like they're shaving each other. You just see the cycle and how it's born into these people, and it's through generation after generation.
Yeah, you can draw a direct line from those scenes all the way to 12 Years a Slave, that in the scene where the guy is barely able to keep himself from being hung by the noose, and in the background you just see the kids playing, and they're just kind of, because it's this daily thing that they see. That's
reality.
Their reality.
That's horrific, but it's true.
So real quick, it was Dana Ivey that plays the white woman,
just as a performance. That's
It's
she's a terrible person, and at the same time, the actor does a really good job of letting her humanity through. She's a person. She's not just a foil for our heroes. That helps. That always helps it. The truth of the thing come through. So that's why I'm praising the lone kind of white person that's featured in the film. But all of them. Glover is extraordinary in it. Winfrey, obviously, and Whoopi Goldberg is sort of amazing. Whoopi Goldberg has the task as a young actor of she doesn't even talk much, so she doesn't get to demonstrate much. She listens and learns and reacts to things.
And I think her reaction to things is what is so strong. Her silent reaction to this, and it's just a very brief glance, or it's remarkable.
Funny enough, I was just watching this documentary about the Comedy Store in LA, and there was the oh my gosh, I can't remember it's called the Belly Room. It was this upstairs room. I think it was called it was the Belly Room. And it was this small little offshoot of the Comedy Store upstairs that was dedicated to women. It was a place for only women comics to come and workshop and do stand-up. And that's where Whoopi Goldberg debuted her one-woman show, her sort of theater piece that started putting her on the map. And that's how she got this role. Was Steven Spielberg and Frank Marshall and them came to see her do this show at the Comedy Store. And one of the things they mentioned is, this one woman show, she's playing, Whoopi Goldberg plays all these different characters. And one of the things, if you've ever seen seen Whoopi's one woman show or even just clips of it, is that she has, her characters not only just tell stories, they listen. And she has these moments where the characters stop and she's just, and her presence and her ability is so good that she's able to, as an audience member, you're like, she is listening to something. She is hearing something. And that speaks to what you're saying, Shauna, is that it's her ability to be an active listener is really, really strong.
It's a stunning debut performance from somebody who doesn't really have any screen credits before that. Of course, she's become whatever. She's just an icon in her own right. Her impish, weird humor is more like those are the types of roles where she's famous for. She won her Oscar for Ghost and the Sister Act films and all that. I think that's the sort of the true Whoopi Goldberg that we got to get to know. But it just makes it all the more impressive that it's an actorly performance that we're watching when we watch her in Color Purple. It's stunning. She brings some of herself to it. I don't want to say she doesn't. Most good performances, you're able to do that, but that's not her on screen at all, really. And yet it's this person that you really believe existed for those 2 hours that you spend with her.
And if you think about how she grows from where she was when she's first introduced as Celie to who she grows into by the end, and when she first is talking to Harpo about Sophia, and Harpo's saying, "What am I supposed to do with her?" And Celie says, "Beat her.
Beat her.
Beat her."
It's so that is so harsh.
Right.
That is so harsh.
Sophia to come back and confront her about it, and for Celie to say, paraphrasing, "This is horrible right now, but when we make it to heaven, that will be forever."
Right.
And
well, and it is. You see that it not that Harpo and Sophia's relationship was aces to begin with, but that single moment completely destroys any chance that it has of being anything.
Right.
Because he's not occurred to him to do that yet. It's just not in his character to do that.
No.
And once he starts doing it and he takes all the power like that, I mean, it's over. It's over for her, and her life has been. Sophia's life has been completely changed,
Right.
and I think Celie takes the responsibility for that sort of throughout the movie.
I really agree. And when Celie sees her in the grocery store with Miss Millie and helps her get all of the Christmas stuff together and makes it so that it's a good experience for Miss Millie and they can leave. And that's when Miss Millie says, I'll bring you to see your children tomorrow. She turns around and thanks Celie.
Right. And like I said, by the end, even Mr. like everybody's in a better place.
Well, they
in sort of an awesome way because they've been able to change.
So
you see, yeah,
it's what
you see real growth from people.
Them.
Yeah,
it's what Celie has done for each and every one of them.
Right.
It's
right.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting because you said that, you know, it's not the place that is described in the book.
Not really.
As far as the physical.
Yeah.
And I admittedly have never read the book. So now I need to go do that.
You probably should. Like, although it's a different experience, it is, but it's still a faithful recreation of the book.
In the people, I feel like the people are the faithful recreation of what the book meant. Yeah. And that's what, you know, and it is kind of, you know, glossy and certain parts of it are a little overdone and it's got this great happy ending and all of that.
It's sentimental, like all of Stevens, even his best films, even his very best films are a little syrupy, but.
Right. But I feel like the people's performances are what let you forgive that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and the fact that it need, you know, if you have to pick, finding that perfect balance is difficult. Better it be over emotional than under emotional, and he does sit back and let some of the horror happen on screen too. I mean, he really does do that. It's a hard movie to watch. I'll admit, I watched it 5 or 6 times through the years, but I don't revisit it very often because I have to get geared up to go down some of the roads that it goes down, you know. Me, you, and our buddy Bill, we had really fun debates about it. Bill Felberg, he's listener of the show. Bill, look, Bill. Shauna's on the show.
Hi, Bill. Awesome? Thanks for listening, Bill.
Yeah. Look out, or you're next, bud.
Bill, you can be famous too.
Yeah. I've known Bill since I was 5, and I literally have scars to prove it. So I don't know. Final thoughts on Color Purple before we move on. We can talk more about when we were younger.
Yeah, no, I was a point I was going to make, and for the viewer, you saw me had to leave. And thank you guys for continuing on and just catching. I'm on solo parent duty right now as my mother helps my mother-in-law with at the hospital. Yeah, no, I was going to say, and I apologize if you guys did already talk about it while I did step away. But one of the great points that you brought up, Shauna, is that it's not just a movie about the Black experience, about the racial experience. It's a story of the female, of the women, of women's experience specifically, and you know, in large part, the Black woman's experience, especially at that time, being essentially just. I think it was either Roger Ebert or Gene Siskel in one of his reviews. It said it's like referred to him as their sexual chattel,
right?
And that was something that I didn't remember about the film until seeing it later. Is just how the sexual politics of it play out.
And if I may interrupt here. Another interesting part was when she found the letters that Hattie, her sister, had sent her from Africa.
They're separated. That scene you talked about, where, just for the audience, if you haven't seen the movie, it's kind of important to understand that sister connection is very, very strong. It's the first thing we're introduced to, and that they're separated when he sort of drags her from the house and sends her on her way, and she writes all through these years. Celie thinks she's just been, that connection's been severed, and Mister's been hiding these letters, this pile.
So she thinks that her sister might be dead. It's a
She
very
has
good,
no idea.
Yep.
right. So then she finds out that her sister actually has been in Africa this whole time, and not even to speak about necessarily why she's there.
And even though Cilie's never writing back,
Right.
is it Hattie? Is that her name?
Hattie,
Ned-
yes.
Hattie.
So, but for Hattie,
Nettie.
She writes her. She doesn't stop. She kind of gets it. She just keeps writing. Maybe
hopefully
someday
you'll get
she'll
this
see
letter
this. Maybe
someday.
maybe at one point she'll get one. It's really
And-
amazing.
What for me too was the description of Africa from a Black woman's eyes,
Mhm.
and how different it is there for Black people than in the US. But again, there's another interesting part of that when one of the girls realizes that the girls can't go to school. It's only the boys in Africa that can.
Mhm.
And this girl comments, it's just like back home or in the US where white people don't want Black people to learn. So it's interesting to see that in Africa, where the Black people live there and where they live, it's their lives, and it's so much better than in the US. But then yet again, for girls, it just still quite is not. There's so many aspects to this that
Yeah.
I could go on for hours.
And we could, but that being, so we could go on, and Shauna, thank you for again not just talking about this movie, but sharing your experience as to why it means so much. Color Purple. We don't need to tell you to check it out, but if you haven't, you should.
You definitely should. Your talk about the experience of Africans in Africa, or an African American in Africa. I mean, that segues into my film pretty nicely, actually.
Yeah, and that's and up next we go forward a few years to 1987. Is that what it is? Yeah, 87.
87, yeah.
Yeah,
mostly 88. It was like Christmas, Oscars 87 release, and
right.
Cry Freedom, which was Richard Attenborough's first film after Gandhi, which was the toast of 1982 kind of Oscars. Shauna and I know each other primarily because our junior and senior years of high school, we were in, I think it's fair to say without exaggeration, we were in every single same elective course possible. So I got to see her 3 times a day sometimes in school, because we were in religion and we were in civics and we were in history and government, pretty much still very civic minded to this day. Although you're good at math, right? Which I'm not good at.
That was a late surprise.
Was it?
That's where it came from. It certainly didn't happen in high school.
So there you go. So when our roads, divided, then they divided that way as well. But that was neat. I mean, it was very clear that that didn't happen by accident. They were elective courses, so we were interested in the same things. Got to go on some cool field trips, and mostly it was just, Shauna was this really cute, kind person who was nice to me in these classes. She was like, "Oh, you do the theater stuff, right? How's that stuff go?" Which is neat. It's neat to be asked about the things that you care about. So this is me doing that in reverse to Shauna. I'm reversing the trick all these years later, talking about what she cares about. I'm glad to be able to do that. Cry Freedom, before we run out of show. It's a totally different kind of story, but it was truly an awakening for me in another way, because the events of Cry Freedom, the film came out in 87. The events take place in 79-ish, something like that. But this was, other than those few years and some fashion differences, this was our present that this stuff was taking place in. I want to say it's the story of South African activist Stephen Biko, but it's not really his story. It's the story of this white liberal guy, a newspaper editor, who, when he travels around with Biko, it is awoken to the true evils of his own government. He's already sort of aware of it. I don't think you could be a white person in South Africa and not be aware of the government's policies towards Black people, but you get from a young age, you get indoctrinated into these ideas that even a liberal, understanding guy who's willing to do an interview with an activist doesn't get it. He needs to live through it. So it's Donald Woods is the name of the character, and in real life, he was Biko's biographer, and the story of this is what got out and made Europe, made America to some degree aware of just how harsh things were for Africans in South Africa. And that was it's not the version of a South African story you would tell today. I don't think you would get into Biko and what his biography was, not just his effect on this white guy who wrote books about him, but that was an inviting way for me to get into this and to learn about it. We got to learn about it. And again, I think we were the audience for this film in a weird way, where African-Americans, and certainly South Africans were not. This was to show us something. Look at this. And that's when I was socially concerned, and I was watching films like Cry Freedom in 1987, where a lot of, kids maybe weren't doing that. So I had that going for me, but I didn't really care about the global experience at all until I saw that film. It changed everything. And I started to follow apartheid and have followed it closely my whole life. The first time I heard of Biko was in the Peter Gabriel song in 1983, which is a great song, which sort of tells the story, but like not, in an emotional way. A song can't really tell you the story. It makes you perk up and want to learn more. And then this came along, and it's a good movie. It's a lot like Gandhi. It's the subject matter's handled in the same way. It's a big, expansive, like David Lean style widescreen film, even though it's an intimate story about this family and their interactions with different cultures. Stephen Biko is played by Denzel Washington, who I knew really well from Saint Elsewhere. But when I hadn't seen Soldier's Story yet. If I had, that would have been, I think for most people, that was Denzel. Wow, that movie. He's amazing in it. He's amazing in this too. He was amazing in Glory the next year, which he won an Oscar for. Like, this was his time of ascension. As good as he was on Saint Elsewhere, it was kind of a boring role, to be honest. He loved doing that. He loved ensemble work. He loved that he was a doctor, not a Black guy on the show. He wasn't even the only Black guy on the show. Like, he appreciated all those aspects of it.
But TV wasn't what it is now.
Right. Yeah. TV was the smaller.
St. Elsewhere was as good a show as you could be on.
Right.
He even said after he won an Oscar, like, what do you want to do? I want to get back on a ensemble TV show. Like, that's what he didn't realize. No, sorry, not you're going to be the star of everything from now on. Like, we all knew that, but it hadn't sunk into him yet. He's amazing as Biko in it. It's not much of a spoiler to say he's only in about the first third of the movie. But that film is just really powerful to me. I don't know what to say. And the South African story is a powerful one. That goes beyond Cry Freedom, which really just ends with the Woods family's escape from South Africa to get the story of Stephen Biko out. Mandela's release from prison and his rise to be prime minister there, and his policies of basically forgiveness without justice, the reciprocity policy where if you were a white person, you just, as long as you honestly admitted to what you did, you were pardoned. That flew in the face of the majority of the people in that country who wanted to punish people. But I think Mandela had this, and he's this saint on earth to me, and it's the guy from my own history or any history that I admire most, because he just was able to forgo that himself. And a guy who was imprisoned and treated horribly for decades for the betterment of the healing of his nation. Like, it just, and then was a charismatic enough and good enough communicator to sell that idea to all the people of South Africa. And they didn't all buy into it, but enough of them did that, you know, I don't want to go overboard. There's still struggles in South Africa, but economically and otherwise, but they're like, you look around what was happening to us in our hometown here just this past year, and you know, there's race relations in South Africa post-apartheid because of Mandela and because of people who followed his leadership is better in many ways than race relations are here in America. And I find the whole thing, which started with my viewing of Cry Freedom, that awakening of that this is real and it's happening right now, continued to be that I got to witness along the way. It's one of the miracles of humanity. I still believe that what happened in South Africa after the ended apartheid is a miracle. It just is amazing to me. So it gives me hope, which I need.
Yeah.
A lot.
One of the things I would say about the movie is, you know, kind of piggies back on what Shauna was saying about the character of Celie. You know, she doesn't say a lot. So much is done with her reactions from listening and being an active listener. That's one of Kevin Kline's incredible gifts that he's able to do on the screen. And in this case, Kevin Kline is serving as the white audience, hearing this and learning this and having their eyes opened.
He's an actor whose dial goes to 11, you know, and he lives in this film at around 5 and 6 the whole time, even when he's in danger, you know, and it's a brave thing for him to do, to understand that even when the story moves on and he takes stage and he's the main character, that it's everything that this guy is experiencing and learning, that's what the story really is. And the film, I think, works great because of that. It's also structured very cleverly. There's a huge race riot that happens near the beginning of the film that they don't show you till the very end of the film. So you get this incredible sequence that serves as something of a, I don't know if it's a climax to the film, but it's, you know, it just, it really shows the horrific stuff. I watched that at a summer camp on just a TV in the middle of the day with like 6 other people. And when it was over, one of the guys was like, one of the older guys who I admired was like, that's not very objective. That was the first thing, because I was sitting there like, you know, maybe I didn't look like that, but that's how I was feeling. And to hear that, just the first chance to dismiss it, somebody took that, and there was this woman there whose name I don't remember, but she was like, she just smacked this guy down. It was really, and it helped. I'm glad she did, because who knows? I was a teenager. Who knows how I would have wandered out of that room, or what I would have thought.
You know,
she was like, what is objective? What are you even talking about? What? Here, say something objective. She's like tasking him with this, you know.
But think about it, made you think, but if she wouldn't have done that, I mean, you're kind of already that person to pay attention to this.
I'd like to think I would have still taken the lesson of it, but
who knows if the 5 other kids would have been just like, psh. What I wanted to say though about the this movie is that I found interesting was that Kevin Kline's character, like you said, it wasn't like nobody, especially a liberal journalist or whatever,
liberal, they keep calling them.
Wouldn't know that, you know, there's rulings that are bad for Black people and all of this, but it just shows how separated the white and the Black people were. And it's
by design, by institutional design.
And if I may go back to The Color Purple, when they're in Africa, the white man comes in and builds a road through their village, demolishing the school, the church, the everything. So kind of the idyllic life that Black people were living at the time, you know, idyllic, was being smashed by colonialism and by white people, which is leading to your movie.
Well, and Alice Walker, it's in her story, and it's an important part of her story. And it's Spielberg, which that's a thing he easily, for time or whatever, could have gotten rid of, and he doesn't. He makes sure that he shows and doesn't tell too. It's a really pretty cool thing.
Yeah,
That's important to understand, because Nettie's sort of version of Africa is poetic and beautiful, and you just, Spielberg often is willing as a storyteller to let us live with that fantasy, and he makes sure that there's some context to it, which is important. So that's very neat.
Another thing that I was going to say that's interesting about the two films that I talked about and now you're talking about is kind of how they're written for white people.
It's true.
It's written in a way that Color Purple, that you got to know the people, you know, you got into it and everything before they kind of smacked you in the face with racism. This, they show you Kevin Kline and get to know him and see through his experiences. Holy cow, there's a whole nother world that's going on right next to my white world. And look at how truly awful it is, but we have no idea how bad it is. It's kind of written, these are written for white people to show them.
And in South Africa, the Black people outnumber the white people like 7-1. So it's even more absurd how disconnected this otherwise, you know, good, well-intentioned and intelligent man. It just, you know, it really, I mean, there's nothing quite like apartheid, honestly. It really, as far as institutional racism goes, I mean, which is the only kind of racism we can really fight. It's hard to fight the other kind. It's hard to even grasp onto it. But institutional racism, we have to fight in every way that we can. And like I said, that I didn't know, you know, if I knew what apartheid was, maybe I didn't even know. It's hard to know. I don't remember where my head was at. I just remember when I saw that film, I realized that if this is our world, these are humans, this is a human experience in our world. It's just otherworldly.
Yeah.
And that did open the door to a lot of different things. So I'm grateful to the film for that. But you're right, it's a big British film, you know, with a huge budget, shot on location, and I don't know where they shot it. They did not shoot it in South Africa, and I can guarantee you. But
I had that. Oh shoot!
Some sort of neighboring place.
Yeah, I think some of it was shot in.
It
was in Zimbabwe. I remember reading. There was another location too that they shot in.
But you know, as a white kid, I needed that experience. I think our films are evolving beyond that, not completely, and maybe they shouldn't completely, but I think they should mostly. I think it is time for Black people to share their experiences with us, and it's time for us to be kind of open-minded to pay attention to those. I think we're getting those movies.
Well,
now.
Sorry, go ahead, Shauna.
It's time for white people not being fed stories of racism.
Right, which I think is the direct criticism that we saw last year for Green Book.
Sure.
And so it's like, okay, yeah, this is a fine story and everything, but we don't need this through a white lens story anymore. Let us have this story from Black filmmakers, Black.
Yeah, I stood up for Green Book because I just felt like that was a white story to some degree.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. No, there is.
For that guy to tell his specific story, which is all it was. But the backlash against it is legit because just taking the movie aside, the like you say, the films that, although I don't know, we argued about this before.
Well, I mean, so
if Beale Street Could Talk came out that same year and nobody saw it, not Black people, not anybody, and it wasn't honored. And the year before, Moonlight won the Oscar, so it's not like we're not somewhat aware of these stories are going on. But
right, and
I get
and,
what you're saying.
and that's
This was
sort of,
all we had in the 80s when we were kids.
right,
I
and
can't
that's
think of a authentic African American story. Oh, they're a good, but they are really, we have to acknowledge that they are white people dealing with racism as a white person problem, which it is.
yeah.
But there needs to be more to it than that. I agree.
So for me, I mean, my movie just actually sort of pigeonholes or moves on nicely from that. It is, and it's a movie, written and directed by a African American man for for Black people, about their lives, and I've been
Specifically from his experience.
specifically from his experience, and it's Boys in the Hood, John Singleton's movie from '91. I've been sitting here for the last the entire time that we've had.
It's John Singleton made a bunch of good movies, but it's still his best film,
right,
because of that personal connection to them.
And I'm trying to remember why I saw it. I don't know why I went and saw this movie, but I did, and I just remember it.
You would have been what, junior in high school?
Junior in high school, and I just
Joel's younger than us by a year, and he went to Osseo.
I did. I went to the rival school.
And where did you go?
I went to Osseo.
Osseo.
Yep. So I was.
Don't hold that against him.
Part of the heated rivalry. However, my mother-in-law was a teacher at Park Center at your school. So
Your mother-in-law was, yes. Sorry.
Yes.
Background.
And but yeah, Boys in the Hood. I mean, I lived a pretty comfortable suburban life. I was a jock. I played soccer. I hung out with my friends in the neighborhood and we played sports. That's literally what we did. Growing up, my elementary school and my junior high school, and frankly into high school, it was the kind of place where we had maybe, a handful of people of color, especially Black people. We maybe only had a handful, 5 or 6. And, I remember my one Black friend was Stevie, and it's because we played basketball together. So I didn't have a lot of exposure to any sort of life outside of suburban Maple Grove. My family also didn't, we didn't even really go downtown at all. Only time I ever went to downtown Minneapolis was on school field trips. So I don't know why I saw Boys in the Hood, but I saw it, and I remember leaving there, not like I'm awake and woke and oh my gosh, it wasn't anything like that. It was like watching a science fiction film about an alien race, because it was I had never been exposed to Compton in LA. I mean, I heard about these things on the news. Obviously I heard about the LA riots, and after Rodney King and everything, and that was my exposure to it. But then to see a party, a celebration of all of these Black people smiling and celebrating something, and that they're just living their normal lives, I was like, I have no idea what's happening here. Where and
the way those things crisscross in the movie is really organic and quite brilliant.
It is so fantastic. And and there are two vivid memories I have, and they both were Lawrence Fishburne moments. It's the one time when he takes Trey, Cuba Gooding, and some of the other kids, and he walks them down to the corner, and he talks about real estate, and how they depress these areas, and essentially his whole talking about the system of how Compton and this area came to be, and how, it's cut off by the, whether it's an interstate or something like that. It's all penned in, and it was this all an intentional, thought out process to keep this community sort of insular and able to sort of depress that area.
I really quick, it really struck me when you said, why do you think there's a gun shop on every corner?
Right.
Why do you think there's a liquor shop on every corner?
Yes.
They want us to kill ourselves, kill.
Yeah. They want us to get drunk and kill ourselves. And and why do you think that there's like, and there's no, like, the hospitals, and there's no, everyone just gets pregnant right away because there's no access to affordable birth control or health, yeah, all of that. And then that directly leads into the comment that I've had in my brain, and it's partly what kept me from having a kid for so many years. I was pretty late, I was in my well into my 30s when my wife and I had our son. Is the quote from his character of anybody can be a dad, or it's like anybody can have any asshole can be a dad, but it takes a man to raise his kids. Or something like that. I'm probably paraphrasing it. Maybe I can look it up here. But any fool. Well, okay. I'm going to use a salty language. If you have a problem with salty language, skip ahead 30 seconds. Any fool with a dick can make a baby, but only a real man can raise his children. That quote stuck. And the way he said it, that stuck with me and has stuck with me for so many, for my entire life. Of if you're, yeah, anybody can have sex, but if you're, and have a kid, but it takes, it takes something to want to raise that kid and to try to do it well. And it is, and that is, yeah, that's something that,
there's several things that set Boys to Men apart from all the sort of gangsta LA films that came out at the same time. We had one a year for 5 or 6, 7 years.
Yeah,
there.
Clockers and
and New Jack City.
And
these were all sort of lumped together. And there were some other ones that were closer in style, I guess, to Boys to Men.
Boys in the Hood.
Well, right. I mean, okay. Boys in the Hood, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, not Boys to Men. Well, you're following me.
I'm following you.
But what the major thing, it really is that Fishburne character. The male influences in these stories they're just almost out of necessity so that you can understand why things are the way they are not shown to be positive. This is that father character of Cuba Gooding Jr. and I assume this is a person from Singleton's life, because it's so vivid and real, even though Fishburne walks through the thing, like you say, like, let me show you something, let me teach you something here, let me explain all this to you. That could be a character that's annoying, but part of it's the actor, and part of it's that he's written as a real person, and you believe him as one. And I mean, he, without question, in this young man's life, he absolutely, all the way along, but then at the end, when he has to step up and save the day, I mean, he truly does.
Yeah,
he truly does give this kid a chance at a better life. And the you see the effort and the work and how it takes presence all the time, not just being a good dad a couple of times in your life, which is a lot. It takes his sort of constant involvement at every stage. And it's one of the most beautiful things about that movie that I just didn't care much about when I saw it when it was new. I saw it yesterday, and that just stuck out at me, like, wow, that's a positive African-American male influence. Not a perfect guy by any means, which is great because he's a real guy, but a positive male influence. It can make all the difference.
Jump in here quick as well. The scene when Lawrence Fishburne's character is talking to Angela Bassett, his ex-wife, or the mother of his child.
Mm-hmm.
And she tells him basically, you know, yeah, you know what? You stood up and you were a dad and you did a lot for him, and that's great. But that's basically what every woman has ever had to do.
Right.
And it's kind of interesting too. I was watching the film and I watched it maybe once several years ago and then again recently. And it's interesting, the Black woman in that film as well. You look at how
his love interest in it, Nia
Long.
Well, no, Ice Cube actually, and how his girlfriend at the time is like, why do you call all women bitches and hoes?
Oh,
Regina King.
yeah.
You know, so it's interesting as well, kind of the relationship between men and women, Black men and Black women.
Well, and so we before we move on, I'll just say again, and I feel like I say this all the time, Regina King.
Yeah.
How many star-making performances do you have to have before you're a star? Apparently, for Black women, it's like 500, because every time I see her in something, and she's barely in Boys in the Hood, and yet every time I see her in something, I'm like, my God, this is one of the most talented actors on the planet. Of all things, I went off on this. You've already heard this rant when we were talking about Jerry Maguire, but
oh yeah,
that, if that's Demi Moore, who is that awesome in a movie, I'm telling you, they are handing her lead roles for till the end of time, and we don't have to feel bad for her. They're doing that for her now. I mean, she's made it. We all love her, but every second of screen time she's in this film, she's just incredible. She's just amazing actor, and apparently always has been. I don't know how old she was, 19 or something when she did this movie. It's incredible. And it's not, don't go looking for some inspirational big role. She plays this sort of gangster hanger-on kind of chick, but it's just living, breathing honesty on screen. I can't get over it every time I see her.
She delivers it 100% every second that she's shown.
It's like she knows when the editor is going to cut away and make sure she gets some bit of punctuation in there.
Yeah.
That, Joel and I have made movies. You don't know which version they're using. You don't know anything. For her to deliver that kind of precise kind of technical acting and yet be emotionally in the moment, it just, there's so many good performances in Boys in the Hood.
Yeah.
The three central guys, Ice Cube, Cuba Gooding Jr., and Morris Chestnut, are all amazing. But I just, I want to give Angela Bassett, obviously Lawrence Fishburne, but I just give a shout out to Regina King. She
bonkers on this. She's so good. So I mean, so that was my first exposure to a way of life that I had only seen in the news. When anytime anyone can bash on LA, and and especially in the 80s and early 90s, it was all about, don't be in this area after dark, or that's it for you, you're dead. This was well-rounded. These were three-dimensional characters. These were all people that had wins and losses and kept going. And that was and I was gonna say, I didn't know this until I was doing some reading up on it, but John Singleton, one of his favorite movies and what he was inspired by was the movie Stand By Me. And knowing
he
that
pays visual homage to it when they're walking down the railroad tracks.
When they're walking down the railroad tracks, I read that final image of showing the Doughboy, as comes in. I mean, knowing that, this is essentially, there's lots of elements about this that is like Stand By Me, in inner city LA.
Part of me, the first time I watched it, wanted it to just stand by me. Like I was almost disappointed at the time jump. It's about a third of the way into the movie.
Sure.
It gets you back pretty quick, but I'm just like, oh no, don't take me away from these kids like this. I want to keep watching.
Yeah, because those kids, and those kids were really pretty charismatic. Their screen presence was pretty crazy too.
Well,
So
I think that this is partly a way too to bring white people in. This is humanity. These are kids that are the same as the kids that you knew and I knew, and you know what I mean? And you get into their life and all of this, and all of a sudden, bam, you're in their life as teenagers. And it's like, whoa, this is real.
Yeah. And to see these guys, these characters, are my age. Right. The characters were playing people that I was the same age as, and going, in your
present reality, at least
in my present reality
parts of the film.
Yeah, and it's like, I don't have to deal with that. That's very different than it's sobering.
There's so many scenes that make you think that too. For instance, when Trey and I can't remember the younger brother's name, were in the Beetle, the Volkswagen Beetle.
Yeah.
The shots in the air, and they get pulled over by the police, and a black policeman is telling Trey, this is why I took this job. And he's just berating him and making him feel awful. He starts crying. And you look at these, these scenes and like you were saying before, the systematic racism and just from every angle.
He's not the only one to have done it, but that's the most prominent institutionally racist black cop I can think in all of films. And Singleton obviously is doing that for a reason, either because that was his personal experience, or even if it's just some fiction, it rings true and kind of doubly tragic and frustrating when you watch it. You expect the white guy with the mustache to jump out of the car and be in this kind of movie and be the jerk, and the fact that it's repeatedly this same black cop, it just, I mean, it's stunning in that way. It really is the best of those types of films from that era for that reason. It's nuanced in a way that most of the rest of them, just as cool as they are, just aren't.
Yeah.
So those are our three movies that these lighthearted films about
they're great. They're all three of them in their own way, though, are great entertainments too. I mean, they're really, really well made movies. Singleton wants to show you something, but he's not trying to. It's not a lecture, these are stories. That's what's so great. It's why we do our show.
Right. And there are parts where you're sitting on the edge of your seat, just like gasping for breath, like, whoa, what's going to happen? So very good movies.
So if you haven't seen them, don't be scared of them in that way. Cry Freedom's a little super long, so warning about that. But
Color Purple.
If you haven't seen Color Purple, you really should, especially if you like seeing Temple of Doom and Empire of the Sun and like all the other Spielberg movies. If you haven't seen that one, you got to see it. It's really, really good. It's so good. And it's the whole reason we're here today, which is kind of awesome.
Yeah.
You getting your life back there, Joel, or no? Can't hear you.
I got my son here. He's singing me a song now. You want to come say hi? Yep.
Yeah, you kind of have to. Now.
Yeah, you kind of have to if you're gonna sing to us. I
remember you from last week's show.
Shauna, hello.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
And of course Uncle Rhyme.
Oh,
All right, but we're almost wrapping up here. Thank you. You're doing so great. Thank you, son.
Yeah, and to a lesser degree, the Beagles. doing a pretty good job.
Oh, right. The
Yeah.
Beagles, they made an
They
appearance.
really are.
We've
yeah.
seen them, but they haven't been terribly disruptive.
They haven't come in to ask you to help him.
They're
look
capable of much more disruption than what we witnessed today.
for... True.
Well, they know how to ring the bell to be let outside. So the younger one has come out and done that a few times, but she hasn't started whining. So
she's
thank
just
you
wants
to my
attention
husband and
outside.
son for taking care of that for me.
So thank you so much for that, for bearing with me on that one, you guys. Appreciate that. All right. So we're coming to the end here of the show.
Yeah, let's do it.
But I think we have a chance to do a little bit of a couple hot takes.
Let's get some hot takes. Let's get some hot takes. Let's get some hot takes. Let's get some hot takes.
Joel.
Yeah.
I haven't heard that for a long time.
I know.
Really fun.
I can't wait to edit it into mine.
So so we all can hear it.
Yeah, I'll put it in the video feed too.
It's back when we were doing this before the world came to an end.
Back when we could actually be in the same place and look at each other on the big bluish couch.
Those were the days.
Or dark blue, almost black couch.
Right. What do you got?
All right, so first one is from NBC News. Oddly enough, I found this headline, which I really liked.
I've gotten to know NBC News over the past few days a little better than I had before.
Kornacki.
Indeed.
Borat, the new Borat movie, is a superhero movie. His superpower is mocking the cruel and powerful in a way that they have no idea they're being mocked, and that is a superhero. That is a superpower.
I get what they're saying, Joel, but no, that's incorrect. That is a stupid hot take by NBC News. There's my reasons are multifold. We'll see how many reasons I can spit out here. Not everything is a superhero movie. I know that people would like that, but that's not true. I don't want the world that way. And I certainly don't want movies that way. Superhero movies are fine. You have enough of them. You don't need to pretend that this one is. B, Borat is a character played by a guy whose specialty is mocking people in just the way you say, but he's just a person. It's not a superpower. He's not a mutant. He didn't come here from another planet. He wasn't born, or gamma rays didn't give him this talent. He just has it because it means something for him to do it. So I don't know, Shauna, maybe you disagree with me, but I think it's not a superhero movie. It's awesome though. And if you like to laugh and you want to see some good social commentary, it's on Amazon Prime right now. So.
Yes, but not every superhero wears the little outfit. Tiny little outfit that might
you could argue that Borat has a superhero costume,
right?
That's hard to argue with.
All right, okay, next hot take number 2.
All right,
the Academy Awards will have to change their eligibility rules to accommodate movies not released in theaters, and this will continue after the pandemic ends, and that will lead to the death of the indie art house movie cinema.
There's 3 hot takes for your single hot take dollar in that one. They've already done that to my understanding. The streaming films that didn't come out in theaters are eligible this year.
That's where this came from. Yeah.
And I agree with them that's a thing that's going to be really hard to change back once they've done it that way, because 2021 at least as we can imagine it now, isn't going to be that different. The first half of it or whatever, God willing, and the creek don't rise, maybe third quarter or fourth quarter, there's some vaccine or something, but this is life for a while. So they won't be able to switch back. And then even when they do, suddenly treating streaming movies different than theatrical films is going to be a tough. People don't treat them any differently, so it's going to be tough for the Academy too.
Yep.
And maybe that's a good thing. I have to believe in my heart it will not kill the indie movie. Streaming is already adopted it and changed it somewhat, but I don't think for the worse. That sort of smaller, they're not really indie movies like a bunch of unknown kids shooting a film someplace. They're Hollywood people making these films that are slightly smaller in scale, but are these more intimate human stories. We're seeing, if anything, we're seeing more of those because of streaming, but they are different. It is a different thing. You take the film festivals out of it, you take the film critics out of it, you take the cycle that we have out of it, and you do change it fundamentally. And I'm as nervous about those changes as anybody, but you have to wait and see. Maybe it'll be a good thing. Who knows? I don't know. Shauna, sorry.
Shauna, you have a thought on that?
I don't really know.
Yeah.
Don't care about the Oscars.
Everything from this happening, who knows what's going to happen to anything.
Life's not going back the way it was for anybody, really,
Right.
Not completely.
And I feel like the streaming, all of that is pushing the envelope. It's pushing the game. Maybe it'll change it a little bit. Hopefully it won't totally get rid of, small films.
Or indie
don't
studios,
think
I think is the real scare and concern.
What's that?
Well, this leads to my next hot take. That
The indie studios, Fox, Searchlight, that's already pretty much gone because of the Disney sale. The little companies, there's a whole bunch of them. Working Title, Annapurna, A24. All these movie studios that all they do is these types of smaller films. I just think they're going to get streaming partnerships and that it's all going to be okay, and that these aren't going to go away, but they're not going to be the same. I mean, just like Shauna says, because nothing's really going to be the same.
The next hot take that I have kind of plays directly into this same idea. It's a natural extension. I think this is not the hot take, but I do believe that we are going to start seeing a further splintering off of social media into much more niche social media things. So instead of Facebook being this whole thing that anyone can talk about everything, and there's little groups within that, we're going to see platforms dedicated to niche discussions and everything. So you'll have a different app for whatever it is that you want to talk about. That will lead to a social media platform that is solely devoted to movie watch experiences, where you can have like movie watching parties to try to recreate the movie going experience at home digitally using so what have like, I know Facebook, you can do watch parties now. There are a few apps where you can sort of all be together on it. YouTube allows a sort of a viewing party sort of way of watching where you can interact with each other. But I think that the extension of that will be that will lead into, that will be what takes the place of these smaller cinema houses. It is a social media viewing experience. Thoughts?
You go first, Shauna.
All right.
Do you have thoughts? Or, I mean, do you think
Can you even imagine that is kind of the question?
Yeah. Do you think
they already have the technology to do this? They're already doing it. But
they're already doing it.
Is it going to become mainstream thing? Because it isn't right now. I don't know. I hope not.
I am the least expert out of all of this as you guys, with all those movies behind you and everything, and really following the business of it and everything. So I don't know.
Would you do that even? Do you even want to do that? Just as a normal,
have you ever done a social media
super fan?
Have I ever done a social media what?
Have you ever done like a social media watch thing where you're...
Would you even want to?
You guys are the first podcast I've ever listened to.
Yeah, so nevertheless,
that's true.
Nevertheless, you're a social media demon.
I would definitely be open to it. It's hard to imagine with my family. I don't think my husband would.
You already have your community that you gather in front of the TV with.
Right,
you really
my
need
family.
a virtual one. Yeah.
And I have to say, my husband has never been a fan of watching a movie in the theater, which I personally love.
Mhm.
So I would definitely be open to it. I'd never thought of it that far, but yeah, I mean, it would be fun to be able to watch it with other people and but I don't really like people to talk during the movie, so I don't know.
That's the big thing. Is
You're going to sit there with 300 people and live stream the movie? That's not the same as watching it. So is it a social media experience or is it a movie watching experience? And if you're just watching the movie, then are you really interacting? And does this virtual, I mean, like, I don't think you can recreate a movie theater experience virtually. But I'm also somebody who, because of the lack of decorum in movie theaters and stuff, like I've moved on from movie theaters too, kind of like Jimmy. I just don't. I mean, he maybe was never into it, but I was super into it. And now eventually at one point I had to economically pick, am I going to collect all these and watch them? Or am I going to, I couldn't do everything.
Big cube.
But it became
to the movies and getting popcorn and Reese's Pieces and a great big Diet Coke and sitting there, and just being immersed in it in the dark. I love that. But I haven't really done a whole lot of it since I got married. That's just not his venue. So.
But I know exactly what you're talking about, and I don't see how they recreate that virtually. And until they somehow can, I don't think that, movies are under threat economically, just like restaurants are. Any place where people gather are in real trouble right now, and they won't come back better than ever. They're going to come back in some altered way.
Creeping along probably for a while.
I can't imagine doing virtual viewings or.
I think I would be annoyed by it.
It would be the equivalent of being in a giant Zoom meeting where everybody leaves their mics on.
And maybe they'll
or maybe if that's what I mean. If somebody could create a social media platform that somehow does it, I mean, that would be interesting.
I think it would kind of be like that show where they have those robots and whatever aliens at the bottom in the dark. Do you remember that?
Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Thank you.
Joel.
Only more annoying.
That was an MST 3K super fan.
I watched it from the very, very beginning.
I like that show, but I think this would be
Minnesota's own.
Yep, started here. All right, I want to just leave it with those 3 hot takes. I don't want to do the 4th one because I like
because you weren't sure about it.
I'm not sure about it. No, it's more political in nature. I don't want to. I don't want to put it out there. I don't want to put that energy out there in the world. Okay. So anyway, Shauna, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
It was really, really wonderful. And now my son's going to join us for the very end of the show here. If you have any thoughts on on your own personal social awakening, sort of how other people live type of movie, you can reach out to us at askjoelandryan@gmail.com, the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan page on Facebook, at Ask Joel and Ryan on Twitter and Instagram, and the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan page on YouTube, which if you are watching us right now, you already are there. So click, like, subscribe, send comments. We would love to hear from you. Thank you all so much for joining us. Until next time, bye.
Thank you for listening to The Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. Remember, all views and opinions represented in this podcast are personal and belong solely to the speaker and do not represent those people, institutions, or organizations that the speaker may or may not be associated with, unless explicitly stated. None of these views and opinions were intended to malign or deceive. And now, here's the producers, circa 1982, to play us out.